Blind Justice presents a hero and a city with secrets hidden by the cloak of night. What's Done in the Dark, the audio drama.
The taxi sputtered to a stop. Dust swirled around the old car. Ruth peered out the window. She saw a quaint cottage nestled between towering oak trees. It didn't look like any medical facility she'd ever seen. Dominic, sitting beside her, clutched her hand. Her knuckles were white with anxiety. Dominic opened the car door and stepped out. The crisp autumn air hit him. He helped Ruth and the two little girls out of the taxi. Daniel followed close behind. They gathered their meager belongings. The taxi driver, impatient, sped away down the dirt road. They stood there for a moment. The only sound was the rustling of leaves in the wind. The cottage seemed to watch them with dark, shuttered windows. A shiver ran down Dominic's spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched.
Are you sure about this, Dominic? This place, it feels strange.
Dominic took a deep breath.
Rosita is our only hope. She helped my grandfather all those years ago. She can help us too.
He squeezed Ruth's hand reassuringly. He led the way up the narrow path to the front door. The girls, their eyes wide with apprehension, clung to Ruth's legs. Daniel, ever the protector, stood guard at the back of the group in his wheelchair. His hand rested on the handle of the handgun tucked into his belt. Dominic raised his hand to knock. Before his knuckles could connect with the wood, the door swung open. A woman stood framed in the doorway. She was older than Dominic expected, with blonde hair pulled back in a bun. Her eyes, though, were bright and alert. A warm smile spread across her wrinkled face.
Dominic, it is you. You've grown so much.
Dominic's anxiety melted away. He hadn't seen Rosita in years, but her warmth and familiarity were like a soothing balm on his worries. He stepped forward and embraced her. She returned the hug, patting him on the back like he was still a child.
Rosita, it's so good to see you. This is Ruth, and these are her daughters I told you about. This is my best friend, Daniel.
Rosita greeted each of them in turn. Her eyes lingered on Ruth for a moment, a knowing look passing between them. Then she ushered them all inside, closing the door firmly behind them. The cottage was small but surprisingly cozy. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The air was thick with the scent of herbs and spices. Bookshelves lined one wall, overflowing with ancient-looking tomes. Ruth looked around the room, her brow furrowed.
Rosita, Dominic told me you were a doctor, but this doesn't look like any medical facility I've ever seen.
Rosita chuckled, a low rumbling sound.
Ah, my dear. Appearances can be deceiving. I specialize in the unseen, the forgotten arts. My methods are not for everyone, and certainly not for those who dwell in the sterile halls of hospitals. My remedies come from the earth, from ancient wisdom passed down through generations. I treat the body, mind, and spirit, not just the symptoms.
Dominic watched Ruth, hoping she wouldn't be scared off by Rosita's unconventional methods. They had nowhere else to turn. Suddenly, Dominic's phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a message from Andre, the once enemy and gang lord, now turned ally. The last person he expected to hear from. Andre had just been released from prison. Dominic had hoped they would never cross paths again under those circumstances. The message was brief but urgent.
Need your help. Daniel 2. Go to the old warehouse by the docks. Now.
Dominic's heart sank. He couldn't ignore Andre's plea. Not after everything that happened in their last encounter. He looked at Daniel, who had also received the message. They both knew what they had to do.
Rosita, I'm so sorry, but something's come up. We have to leave now.
They raced back to the city, the taxi driver grumbling about the late hour. The city lights blurred into streaks of color as they sped through the dark streets. Dominic's mind raced. What could Andre possibly need from them, and why now, after all this time? The old warehouse loomed before them, a hulking shadow against the night sky. Broken windows gaped like empty eyes. The air reeked of decay and danger. Dominic's hand instinctively went to the pocket where he kept his switchblade.
Stay close.
He told Daniel, his voice tight with apprehension. He led the way towards the warehouse, Daniel right behind him. The door creaked open with a groan, like a dying man's last breath. The air inside was thick with dust and the scent of mildew. Shadows danced in the faint moonlight filtering through the grimy windows.
Andre?
Dominic called out, his voice echoing in the vast emptiness. A low growl answered him. Dominic froze. That wasn't Andre. He pushed Daniel behind him, his senses on high alert. He heard the scrape of claws on concrete coming from the far end of the warehouse. A shape emerged from the shadows. It was a dog, a German shepherd. But it was unlike any dog Dominic had ever seen. Its fur was matted with blood, its eyes wild with pain and fear. It snarled at them, its teeth bared in a menacing snarl.
Easy, boy. We're not going to hurt you.
The dog hesitated, its growl rumbling deep in its chest. Then, with a whimper, it collapsed to the ground, its strength finally failing it. Dominic rushed to the dog's side. He could see that it was badly injured. Deep gashes covered its body, some still bleeding sluggishly. He gently examined its wounds, his heart aching for the animal's suffering.
We need to get him out of here.
He said, scooping the dog into his arms. It was surprisingly heavy, but he ignored the strain in his muscles. The dog whimpered again, its head resting trustingly against Dominic's chest. They hurried back to the taxi, ignoring the driver's protests about no animals. Dominic held the dog close, whispering soothing words to it. He didn't know what had happened to the dog, but he knew he couldn't leave it to die. Back at their apartment, they cleaned the dog's wounds as best they could. They fed it scraps from their meager dinner. The dog ate ravenously, its tail thumping weakly against the floor. Despite its injuries, it seemed to be on the mend. Dominic and Daniel were instantly smitten with the dog. They named him Nugget for his insatiable appetite for chicken nuggets, a delicacy they had plenty of. Nugget quickly became a part of their makeshift family. He was fiercely protective of them. He never strayed far from their side. Dominic couldn't shake the feeling that Nugget had been sent to them for a reason. One evening, as Dominic was playing fetch with Nugget in the park, an old man approached him. The man's eyes, though clouded with age, held a spark of recognition.
That dog, he belonged to my son. He was a good boy, my son. A hero.
The old man's words sent a chill down Dominic's spine. He knew deep down that Nugget's arrival was no accident. The dog was a link to his past, to Andre and to the secrets that haunted them all. As Dominic looked into Nugget's intelligent eyes, he saw not just a loyal companion, but a guardian, a protector, a symbol of hope in a world that often seemed devoid of it. He knew that their adventure had just begun. They had found each other, a band of misfits, united by fate and circumstance, and together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead.